I'm going to bring the meeting. Okay, committee, bring the meeting to order, 3:30. Thank you all for being here. Conferees, thank you very much for also presenting. I think we only have one today. This is pretty weird, the first virtual meeting. I'm sitting in a room with Francie. So anyway, very good. Just kind of bear with us as we go through this exercise, and hopefully everybody will be able to get their questions answered and all that kind of stuff. So, okay. Well, very good. So, Dan, do you want to start us off then?
I would. Good afternoon. My name is Dan Decker. I am the Director for Rehabilitation Services for the state of Kansas, DCF. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today. I believe my presentation was sent ahead of me, so each of you have the opportunity to follow along. So if that is not the case, please let me know. What I want to do today is just provide a little bit of overview over vocational rehabilitation and rehabilitation services in general, to provide a little bit of overview on what we do on a daily basis, what our processes are, and how that relates to Employment First legislation from 2011. So for those of you who are not familiar with Kansas Rehabilitation Services in a specific situation, as we see at the beginning of the slide, throughout the presentation, we're going to feature photos of Kansans with disabilities who are successfully employed as a result of our services. Our mission with VR, which is a program of Rehabilitation Services Division within the Department of Education, is working in partnership with Kansans with disabilities to achieve their goals for employment, independence, and self-sufficiency. Vocational rehabilitation is authorized through the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 as amended in 2014, making us a core partner of the WIOA legislation, which is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. The purpose of this program is to empower persons with disabilities to maximize their employment, their economic self-sufficiency, their independence, and inclusion and integration into society. And that's the first piece of what we'll talk about today that relates to the Employment First legislation, specifically to the points of inclusion and integration. Congressional findings talk about work as a valued activity, both for individuals and society. Work fulfills the need of an individual to be productive, it promotes independence, it enhances self-esteem, and allows for participants in it to be a productive member of mainstream life. In Because I Work, Phenomenological Inquiry of People with Disabilities, which was co-wrote by my predecessor, Michael Donnelly, some little pieces from that talk about disabilities individuals with disabilities who participated in a research project and what their thoughts were regarding employment. Work fills a big void in my life. I feel more interesting because I work. Work contributes to a sense of identity. And then how do you introduce yourself if you don't work? Others said work gave me a sense of accomplishment, self-pride, felt on purpose, joy, and a confidence to learn new things. Work gives people the opportunity to choose their own path, and work gives hope to be a part of the world. It's because of this that VR emphasizes employment. VR offers the opportunity to pursue work and self-sufficiency. Individuals with disabilities, including individuals with the most significant disabilities, are presumed to be capable of engaging in gainful employment. And that's an important tenet to what we do on a daily basis. It's our thoughts within our agency and within our unit that everyone has the capability to work. The provision of individualized VR services can improve their ability to achieve that competitive integrated employment. And again, that's a reference to Employment First, in that we want to limit supported employment and move towards fully integrated competitive employment with all of our individuals that we serve. Core principles of our agency. We work with community-based services in competitive integrated employment outcomes are emphasized. VR counselors work in partnership with consumers to help them assess their skills and interests to develop individual plans for employment, or I may reference later as an IPE, and to provide purchase needed services. One of the key things to talk about when we reference VR counselors working in partnership with consumers is the idea of informed choice. It's something that you may hear referenced often when talking about individuals participating in rehabilitation services. What that means is it really is a one-on-one partnership between the individual and the VR counselor to help identify what the needs and skills are of the individual and how that matches up with labor market sectors, and how we can help them get to those positions through training, through other resources that we may have to help better suit their needs and help them achieve their goals. Services are customized according to each person's strengths, interests, skills, goals, and that informed choice. Currently, we have 73 qualified VR counselors stationed in DCF offices throughout the state with an average caseload of around 75. Now, when we talk about qualified VR counselors, that qualification is set by the Rehabilitation Services Administration, requiring master's degree in a counseling or a related field, along with other criteria. We also offer a network of more than 120 public and privately service providers across the state of Kansas in working in services that we'll get into in just a moment. Again, VR is an employment program, and individuals who participated are expected to become employed as a result of our services. Individuals must be available to pursue employment. Persons referred and applicants may be unemployed, underemployed, or in need of services to maintain employment. That's a key piece there as well. We work a lot in retention to make sure that we're keeping individuals on the work sites and so that they do not have those gaps in employment. Individuals who have temporary health conditions such as broken limbs or pregnancy are not eligible for VR services by those conditions alone. They may have another condition that would qualify them for services, but based on those temporary or short term, they would not qualify. VR is not a source for emergency medical or medical insurance coverage. And VR works with persons with all types of disabilities. And this is something we'll reference a little bit in our numbers later. It's not just physical disabilities, obviously mental, behavioral, other individuals with diagnosed disabilities are eligible for services. We're going to go a little bit through the process today. So this is just a slide that kind of gives you an idea of the 6 pieces of a potential VR process. I say potential for the reason if you see in the second selection there of order of selection. Order of selection only occurs when there is a lack of funding to the program to provide services for all those interested in the program at the time. We're not in that status right now and haven't been for about 9 years. We don't anticipate that being the case. For application and eligibility, after a consumer applies for services, he or she will meet with their VR counselor or another staff member person for an interview. During the interview, VR will collect information about the individual's strengths, individuals' employment skills and interests, and individuals' educational, disability, and employment background. If there's more information needed, obviously, we'll continue to work with that individual, refer them to other agency if needed for some additional assessments, whether that be like a psychological assessment that we would need to have by a professional or anything of that nature. As you can see, there are 3 components to be eligible. They must have a physical or mental disability. Disability results in a substantial impediment to employment and requires VR services to achieve employment. Those eligibility standards are not set at the state level. Again, that is to RSA standards, making sure that these are individuals who seek employment and we can be of direct linkage to getting them to that stage in their life. Persons who are found eligible will develop an individualized plan for employment, or again, an IPE. This is a plan of action that describes the steps and services a customer will need to reach his or her employment goal. One of the first steps is to identify what kind of job the consumer wants to get. During that establishment of that IPE, we work directly through ONET and other different labor market related softwares in order to label what we want the client to achieve, what they want to achieve in what fields, so that we can provide justification for exactly what kind of training or support services are available for that individual to achieve that to that goal, and whether that means a specific kind of certification or anything like that. It's based on the kind of life the individual wants to build, the individual's career interests and abilities, jobs that fit that individual's interests and abilities, and most importantly, available jobs in that labor market. Necessary services are identified. So after an individual determines their employment goal, the next step is to identify what services are needed to meet that goal. We have several, obviously, it could be everything from vocational counseling and guidance, employment-related training at a vocational school, community college, or university, physical or mental restoration services, supported employment, which we're trying to get away from as much as possible. We are really pushing integrated and employment away from supported. We have job seeking skills training, job development and placement, on-the-job coaching, and then there's also community-based job tryouts and on-the-job training funds, and assistive technology. Obviously, individuals with disabilities that require different technologies in order to gain employment, we're a resource for that. VR collaborates with several partner agencies to expand program and services available to individuals with disabilities. Our partners include, but are not limited to, other state agencies, educational institutions, consumer and advocacy agencies, community partnerships, and business and industry is also vital. We work directly with employers that have needs for individuals, and we will work with them in terms of assistive technology, other things to help individuals with disabilities to get into the workforce. I'll jump in for just a second and talk about our pre-employment transition services, because everything we've talked about up to now is for adults. One of the things that we identify and is helped identify through RSA is the need for that introduction to the world of work. That occurs through our pre-employment transition services, or what we often call our PREETS program, and it's designed to provide job exploration, counseling, and other services to help youth prepare for employment and self-reliance. We work in collaboration with the Department of Ed so that we have counselors come into the schools, working directly with the school counselors on these transition programs, in the ages of 16 to 21. We're also working with them right now to get that where we're serving those individuals 14 and above, to get that early engagement into the world of work, start working on skills that they're going to need to transition to either post-secondary or directly into the world of work. Services are designed to provide that early start at job exploration and assist students with disabilities in making that transition from secondary to post-secondary education, and again, competitive integrated employment. A critical piece of VR is our funding across both our PREETS and our traditional VR. The cost of the program is shared by both state and federal governments, with 78.3% of all the funding coming from the federal government and 21.7% matched by the state. And we need that in order to pull down that original grant funding. When providing services to consumers, we work with our partners to blend funding to serve our mutual consumers. This is part, again, of us being a core partner within WIOA. We work in partnership with the Department of Commerce and local workforce investment boards to help provide those services across the state. So within that IPE that we were mentioning, the counselor will meet with the individual from time to time just to make sure that we're still on track and to discuss any important pieces for success. Depending on the individual needs, VR services may last a few months to several years. Progress measures help assure that the plan for employment stays on track. One important thing there is services must be pre-authorized in writing by the VR counselor. So it is really a collaboration with that counselor and the individual seeking services to make sure that we're on track and we get that authorized to make sure that we're in compliance with RSA and we're making the appropriate payments to the entities needed. One of the services we offer is job search. So obviously getting a job is the goal of the partnership between the individual and the one receiving services. The job search and placement services the individual will receive will depend on their needs. It could be resume preparation, practice interviews, development of job leads, guided placement, and customized placement. And a lot for customized placement, to get more in detail there, is literally working with business leaders to develop different job opportunities that fit the individual needs of clients. In addition to receiving direct services from staff, consumers may receive services through our extensive network of service providers, as I mentioned earlier, across the state. We have independent living centers, assistive technology programs, mental health centers, community developmental disability organizations and affiliates, medical providers, other community rehabilitation programs, and other private providers. In 2019, for program year 2019, which ended in June 30th of 2020, we served 9,918 individuals total. 3,673 new applications were processed. We had 4,892 active IPEs during that time. So that consists of individuals that were up to that date, with those 73 VR counselors that I mentioned before. Another highlight of our PY 2019 is we had 1,225 individuals achieving stable, competitive, integrated employment. 28% of employment outcomes achieved by transition youth. So those are individuals who started the program and at the pre-ETS level and moved on to our traditional VR services. Here's a little breakdown next on what are some of the disabilities of individuals who closed successfully in the program. Just making sure that we look at the note there that says persons with traumatic brain injury as the cause of any primary disability represented 1.8 of persons closed successfully, and persons with autism represented 10% of persons closed successfully. So you can see we have a wide range of disabilities of individuals who are served. From our leading category there of mental illness to general physical disability, blindness, visual impairment, deafness or hard of hearing. All of those are encapsulated in some of our numbers. We serve people across the state with obviously a variety of disabilities, and we adapt our services to each of those individuals. More of our highlights there, $11.04 was the average hourly wage for anybody who achieved employment in program year of 2019. 76% of persons employed who report their own earnings as their largest source of support, and 79% of persons employed who have health insurance through their employer. So they're not receiving other services in terms of self-sufficiency and for medical needs. We had 1,633 students with disabilities participating in our pre-ETS program. And here are a few examples of some high-paying jobs that were achieved by individuals participating in VR through that same time period. In the Kansas City region, we had an assistant design engineer at over $52 an hour. In the Southeast area, we had an iron worker at over $34 an hour. And you can see the others there as well. Something that came under my direction as I took over in March of 2020 is we did have a couple major policy changes that affect how our individuals have access to our programming. One of those is our maintenance policy. For those of you who may not be familiar with the term maintenance, it is the excess expense caused by participation in one of our programs allowable through our services. The prior policy was that for persons receiving SSI or SSDI, we would have them contribute 75% of their SSI or SSDI to their participation in the program. We felt like we were having individuals who didn't want to access our services or couldn't access our services or were scared to share their financial information before accessing our services would not participate in our program. So with that, we reduced that to 30% of the average monthly SSI. So if we are unable to calculate someone's financial situation, then we have lowered that to where for that only that excess expense, then we will calculate to 30% of the average SSI amount. The second major policy change was in the area of economic need. Each state has the ability under RSA to determine economic need and the use of that for any individual seeking any kind of services within VR. Prior, we would do an economic need assessment, and based on someone's economic need and their available ability to contribute, there would be a cost calculation that they would help contribute to some of the tuition costs, to the hard surfaces, maybe a hearing aid or anything like that. Effective 10/1/2020, we've eliminated that. So individuals who have a disability are more encouraged to access our services and participate without fear of it becoming a financial burden for them to do so. I want to end today's presentation before I answer questions with a few success stories. First of all, we'll talk about Kelsey. Kelsey is working for Blue Cross Blue Shield and earning almost $17 an hour plus benefits, and recently wrote the following statement about her experience with VR and her counselor, Angela Roberson. So what I have really appreciated about the services is mostly the support and understanding by you. I needed the aid absolutely, but it was more the willingness and assistance from you that I really appreciated. You have been the absolute best about this entire process. What being employed means to me is independence. I have the freedom and financial ability to take care of myself and my son. I've always had a job, but now I'm working on my career, and that means the most to me. Sean has worked with Johnson County Development Supports and received supported employment services, including job coaching. Sean is a very personable individual who is excellent at giving great customer service. As a courtesy clerk, Sean has multiple opportunities during each shift to provide customer service in a variety of ways to customers of Hy-Vee and his coworkers. Sean has accepted responsibility to be cross-trained and add additional duties and tasks to his position. He continues to be a role model for all employees at Hy-Vee. Sean is humble about his achievements, but admits that he takes initiative to assist coworkers and supervisors whenever possible. Sean states he loves his job and loves going to his job. He believes this is a good fit for him and he may be able to become an assistant manager at some point to maximize his employment even further. Sean loves both his job and the wonderful supportive assistance he has received from JCDS to maximize his employment. Sean closed successfully, making $10 an hour as a courtesy clerk at Hy-Vee. And one more, Macy White is an active junior at Mays High School. She currently participates in cross country, Fellowship of Christian Students, and choir. Macy began receiving services from Pre-ED's program in February of 2020. Over the course of several pandemic-filled months, Macy has taken advantage of the services offered to her. She has come, sorry about that, I just flipped over. During the summer, Macy requested to receive services weekly, which is exciting. These services include job exploration, workplace readiness, post-secondary education counseling, and self-advocacy. Although she has work-based learning on her plan, Macy has not participated in paid work-based learning experience yet. She looks forward to seizing the opportunity, possibly this school year. She is interested in participating and wants to experience what it's like to have a job. She has focused a lot on exploring careers and interests to her and identified the positions of child life specialist and kindergarten teacher as her top picks. Using ONET job database and profiler, Macy was able to identify her interest areas and learn about the education, job duties, and skills needed for the jobs that she wants. She has also been introduced to several other jobs that may be of interest to her. Macy believes that ONET is a good resource for those seeking to learn more about specific jobs. In her words, ONET is cool and interesting. It's truly been a pleasure working with Macy. She is bright, positive, and dedicated. 3 attributes that will surely take her far. As I continue to work with her, I can tell that she has a passion for children and wants to serve them in some capacity. With her attitude, she can do just about anything. I look forward to continuing to work with her as she prepares for a career with children someday. And we'll skip that last one. And I just to the point and why I added those to the end, and I hope that it wasn't a waste of your time, as I know your time is valuable. But I think that's a clear piece of how important the program we serve is to not only our consumers, but our staff. That last one was written by a staff member, and you really get to see the passion that our individuals have for the work that they do and for the clients that they serve. So with that, I will open the floor for any kind of questions you may have of me.
Good. Dan, thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate that. Committee, questions? Okay, Susan, ask away.
Sorry. I've got a few questions, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. First off, I made a note. What is supported employment?
So supported employment is more. That's hard to explain, I guess. And I can get you the definition as it's provided by RSA, but it's more of the. I don't want to use the word hand holding through the process, but that's more of what it is. Providing even on the job day trainings and supported with an individual, whether that be a case manager, caretaker, whatever, on the job with them. But I will certainly get the definition. I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, that's okay. I didn't know if it meant financially supported, if there was some state money involved. Okay. And then, is there a waiting list for these services?
Not right now. That's part of that order of selection that I mentioned. We have not had that in several years and don't anticipate that anytime soon. Okay.
And then my next question is, I'm not sure if I know how to ask this right, but so if they get a job, does their employer automatically know that they are involved with some type of a rehabilitation service through the state, or is that kept private?
It depends on the situation. A lot of times we're actively working with the employer to establish the sites to begin with, so they'll know because they'll have communications with the counselor. It's also part of our retention efforts. If we have a release from the client and we're working directly with the employer, we'll make sure that we're providing all the services we can to keep that person employed. In some cases, employment is gained independently of the program, and we're helping them with support services and with more of a job search type of criteria. Under that, the employer would not be aware of the situation.
Okay. Well, thank you for what you do, and thanks for your presentation. And I do really appreciate the stories at the end. I think that personalizes it, and I those are really nice to get. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was listening carefully, but I think I might have missed it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How do people know about your services again? Would you remind me how they know about those services?
You didn't miss it, and that's what we struggle with. A lot of it is our outreach. What we do is we do have partnerships with community-based organizations around the state that we use as a referral platform. We get a lot of referrals directly from agencies that are already working with individuals in the community. We may get directly from an employer. We are, for the most part, at this time, a referral-based entity. We would love to be able to advertise our services, and we do to some degree on social media. But I think there's always room for improvement in that area.
If I might just ask one more, Mr. Chairman, if you had to say you are after a specific target, who would be your target consumer?
I don't think there's a tight window on that, Representative Ballard. I think it's really any individual who has a disability, and I think I think one of the things that we can help offer that maybe goes unlooked is the ability to help diagnose that, refer individuals to the right place. And if there are individuals out there that are struggling to get employment because of whatever disability they may have or may feel that they might have, we can certainly point them to the direction to get those assessments done so we can get a diagnosis, and we can certainly assist those individuals as well.
Well, Dan, thank you. I think it's a service that's definitely needed. And as you say, you have to get the word out and the referral. But in terms of what it offers, I'm impressed. And I think I'm with Representative Concanon. To hear the little stories at the end, they'll give you an idea of how diverse it might be and how people can recognize success. You would say $10 an hour wouldn't be a lot, but for someone who has a disability and someone who wants to become independent, and feel proud of themselves. I could see that person at Hy-Vee being extremely proud of what they have achieved. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We say often that we don't reserve the right to define someone's definition of their own success. We're simply there to assist them on their path and their journey to get there. So thank you for that.
Representative Helmer.
Yes, I had a student that had a lot of problems, and I just wanted to share that the parent, this student was suicidal. He was a senior, and he was in a rural town, and he was very suicidal. And a miraculous thing happened. A policeman came because he was so suicidal. He got a gun, and the policeman knew about your organization. And his mother had called me, and I was a Wichita counselor, and I didn't know anything about your organization. And I was trying to think what we could do with him, and he was a very large child, getting ready to graduate from high school. And so what I had recommended was to call the police. And so we were all there hoping we were going to live through this ordeal, but the policeman came and he was really good. And he knew about your organization, so we got him into your organization, and that was probably about 4 years ago, and he's alive and well. And he did not like the work. He did not like the routine. He did not like the pace, and he did not like leaving mom and daddy, but it saved him. So what I see is, and all of Wichita, every counselor I talked to did not know about it. So we've got to get this out that, I try to tell people about what's going on, and people still don't really know about it. It just needs more. It's a great thing. Kids don't have this work and the work routine and the training and what they get. So thank you for what you do, and you saved a life. You probably saved a lot of lives that I don't know about, but I love that kid, and you saved him. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that it wasn't me. It's the people that work on the line in our offices across the state that I cannot thank enough for the hard work and the passion they show every day.
Well, you're all in it together, so I appreciate it.
Representative Ruiz.
Yes, hi, Dan. Thank you so much for your presentation. Can you talk a little bit about some people's hesitancy to access the services because they think they will lose their Social Security benefits?
Yeah, sure. And I think that's a lot of the piece of that economic need that we eliminated too. It's one of the things that we always have to be mindful of is in those discussions we're having around the IPE, and we're starting to develop some of those, which we can't do obviously if we don't get them in the door, is just talk about the long-term abilities and benefits of working. Obviously this is still a voluntary program. We don't require individuals across the state with disabilities to participate, but we want to and to encourage individuals to do so. Just for a lot of those benefits that I talked about in the presentation in terms of from that one study, and there's studies all over that just talk about the emotional needs that are met through work. But yes, to your point, Representative Ruiz, there's always going to be a hesitation based on how it changes their calculation of income and how that affects their SSI and SSDI. And so there are obviously, and we don't want to promote it, but there's obviously ways to limit hours, limit income to not affect those at all. But I think at the end of the day, what we really want to push is, we don't want to be what makes you lose your SSI or SSDI. We want to be that program that lets you establish your own income where you don't have to concern yourself with SSI and SSDI anymore. I think there's still negative connotations and societal obstacles that people face because there's so many people out there that don't believe individuals with disabilities can work. And so I think that it's too often been perpetuated within the community itself that they need to rely on SSI or SSDI. And that's not our goal. Our goal is to recognize that everyone has the ability to work and how can we assist them in getting there. So it is an issue. We try to address it as best we can.
May I ask another question, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Dan, do you have staff who are knowledgeable regarding benefits? I mean, I've worked with people with severe mental illnesses, and being able to get them connected to VR services was very important. But when I worked at Truman Medical Center, there was an excellent benefits counselor that was there that we could talk to and have that person talk to our client about this is how many hours you could actually work and not have your benefits reduced, your Social Security reduced.
Yeah.
Is that still something that your department does?
It is not. That was actually something that was removed out of the funding long before my tenure. Something we would love to get back. It's just one of those situations where if you pull those resources to fund those positions, you lose upfront counselor positions at the same time. So obviously we would love the ability to expand back to where we were before. Roughly a decade ago, we had 130 counselors. We're down to 73. 73 is actually a rebound within the last 3 years. We were below 60. So we've built back a little bit. One of the things, though, we are doing to help mitigate those a little bit is in my previous role with the agency, I actually was the employment director over SNAP for DCF. So I have a lot of relationships and experience in working with individuals' TANF and SNAP dollars and how can kind of work together. So we have a lot of cross training that we're developing for 2021. We're bringing in other agencies to talk about their benefits, how they work. Other entities within DCF are working on resource officers that can help within our offices across the state to explain benefits across the spectrum to everyone as they come through. So we're trying to make it as an agency initiative. But right now, unfortunately, we don't have the funding to provide those positions we did a decade ago.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Vaughn.
Chair, I have two questions, if that's okay. The first, you mentioned, thank you. You mentioned Johnson County Developmental Support Services, and I was curious how your agency interacts with the county level departments to implement your services and do outreach in the community.
Sure. I can go into specifics probably at a later time. Basically, what we do is, again, it's typically through referrals, but anything that we work on the county level basis, obviously, is we bring in a lot of community-based organizations. We do meetings with individuals and county entities, both government and private, in order to make sure that we're providing a community for individuals with disabilities. It's hard across anybody, any population, but particularly individuals with disabilities are such a community-based population. They rely on their community for lots of services, and we can't always provide those all for them. So we really do try to link into county offices to different community, whether it be at the city level, township level, in order to help provide those wraparound services. You hear that term thrown around a lot, but that really, I don't want to get too cliche-ish, but the idea of it takes a village. I mean, it really, with the disabilities community, that certainly becomes an important piece.
That's great. Thank you. And my second question, you mentioned that you often coordinate with or reach out to employers as potential employers for your constituents who seek your services. And I was curious what the kind of qualifying criteria are for employers that you reach out to. You mentioned wages a couple times. Are you aiming to provide livable wages for your clients? What are some of those criteria?
Sure. And you're correct. We're always looking for livable wages. One of the things that we also look at, we're really looking at, and I think it was referenced in one of the success stories, is we're looking for careers. We're not looking for just jobs, we're looking for careers. And we turn the tables a little bit on what you mentioned there about the criteria of the employer. What we often do is we approach employers with the criteria of our consumers. And the criteria of our consumers that is of a great benefit to the workforce is that studies, and I can get the numbers for you, I don't have them with me handy, but the amount of individuals with disabilities that stay with the same employer over time is phenomenal. It is a in stark contrast to individuals without disabilities in terms of their retention. So we approach employers talking about turnover. What are your hidden costs in training and HR services to bring on additional staff? That is a key component of one of our conversations with employers, is that we can help reduce some of those hidden costs. And that's also what we do, when we're talking about hiring individuals with disabilities and they may have any kind of adaptive technology, we can help assist with that. Or even if the employer themselves has to provide it, they're still covering those hidden costs. So I would just always say that we always want to talk about the benefit of our consumers and not try to pinpoint an employer, because as it goes back to it, we feel that anybody has the capability to work and we will help them achieve what they can to the best of their abilities. So we'll approach any employer.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, committee, thank you for the great questions. I do have a few, Dan, for you. One thing I want to applaud you on the policy changes. Much of our testimony last year was about those policy changes that you've made and how much of a detriment that was to our system. So I applaud that. I'm glad to see that. I think it's been a long time in coming. A couple of other things I wanted to touch with. You talked about the wait list, and there is no one on the wait list at this point in time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there are no other people out there, correct?
That is correct. Obviously there are individuals with disabilities who could benefit from our program. And as we talked to Representative Ballard about, we just have to continue to tell our story and sell ourselves to make sure that individuals across the state know that we're available and what we can do.
I just don't want people to think that we're done.
No, we've got more capacity to fill, and the more individuals we continue to work with, the more we can apply for additional funding from RSA. So
now on to more of a budget type of situation. I've heard a lot of complaints from providers about the reimbursements. Could you get into that a little bit and tell us how they're reimbursed for the job training, but job coaching and basic, if they were a provider?
Sure. We'll, talk about it a little bit. I think there's always going to be discussion about what our rates are. I think one of the things that handcuffs us a little bit as we look at rates is we're comparable to a lot of our neighboring states, but we're certainly not higher in a lot of our reimbursement rates for services. But it's also corresponds with the fact that we don't provide as high a wage for our staff as other states and neighboring around us. I think that a lot of those, Mr. Chairman, I think a lot of those rates are up for discussion. As I said, I took over the position in March of 2020, and we've began to work more in lockstep with our providers across the state. And I think we can continue to look at where those rates are or where they need to be. I think what we want to look at in a long-term perspective is how we can not only modify the rates, but how we can modify the actual services that we provide. because I think there's some holes in the services that we provide that would allow us the opportunity to increase those rates by enhancing the service description that we're currently using. And so, yeah, I think that's important, and particularly to the provider situation. I don't think we've necessarily done a great job in the past in how we communicate with our providers, both from our expectations and realizing their expectations and needs. We have established a new position and have brought an individual on as a community outreach and provider manager. His job will be to travel the state. Maybe during these times it'll be virtual, but set up provider roundtables. And we have our first one slotted for February, where we're actually going to have quarterly meetings with all our providers to just talk about what they're seeing as needs in their area, how can we adapt those services, how we can affect rates, how those decisions are affecting at the ground level. And so I would concur that I think there are some rate adjustments that need to happen. But I want to, under my leadership, my goal is to tie them more directly to the services that we're providing, and making sure we're enhancing not only the service and not only the money, but the service to go along with it.
Thank you for that. I think what runs into is the dilemma between providing these services for these folks and filling the revenue stream that is lost when they leave. And they're not going to be whole. So if they're getting $140 a day for a day worker, and they're going to train him and going to lose him, they're going to lose not only that, but they're going to lose the money. They're not reimbursed at a correct rate or a proper rate to incentivize, quite frankly, that job training. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, I think what happens a lot, I think that is the one downside to the informed choice that I mentioned during the presentation, is that if a client says, I'd rather work with entity X than entity Z halfway through their plan, and that new organization offers the same level of service, we can at best tell them we prefer, whatever, out of continuity, let's stick with this provider. But if ultimately the family decides they want to move to a different provider, then that disrupts the contingency of the agency that was already working with them. So that is an issue, because we don't sign obviously a contract. A consumer's not bound to a certain provider for X amount of months or X amount of hours or anything like that. So we run that risk. One of the things that's also hard for us when working with providers is, and it's particularly hard for the provider, is we can't guarantee referrals. So if our numbers of applications are way down, or the number of participants in our program are way down, we can't guarantee those sources of funding for our providers, because it's out of our control. And I think what we're really going to run into is because of the pandemic, our application numbers were way down in the second quarter of 2020. And I think we're only starting to see how that's going to affect our providers. But I would anticipate in the next year or so, as our numbers of active participants are going to be more indicative of what that low application rate was. And so I think we're going to have even more of these concerns, to be honest.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you, Dan, again for being here. And committee, I appreciate the great questions. And so I'm going to let Dan sign off. And then committee, I just have a couple of requests for you. During this last deal here, I realized that I hadn't taken the time to reach out for your cell phones so that I could text you information as I get it. If you would allow us, if you don't use your cell phone for anything like this, then that's fine too. But any of you that would like to provide your cell phones to Francie, just send those in on an email to Francie, and we'll try to get an email list together so that I can get information out to you in a timely manner as I learn it. So I would very much appreciate that. If you have some privacy issues or whatever, I won't share it with anybody, but anyway, that's what I would like to get. So any other questions, committee? We,
No, Mr. Chairman, but may I just make a comment? I found Dan Decker to be extremely interesting. And we knew about his services, but I learned a lot more today about it. And if there's anything we can do to help him get the word out, you know, I think all agencies need other people to help them do this as well. And I agree with you. The policy changes were needed and are very, very effective, I think. So thank you so much for bringing him in today.
well, Representative, you remember last year's testimony, and in the past, we've always heard that that was such a barrier for folks to give up part of their income and pay it back to DCF when they got a job or subtracted off their SSI. So I am extremely pleased to see that. So,
Yeah, me too. Me too. Thank you.
committee, any further questions? We will meet the rest of the week as scheduled. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.